It's been 1 year since a spring Tuesday deep in the heart of Texas turned tragic.
My main priority is to honor my daughter's name.
21 lives lost far too soon.
There's 21 lives, there's 21 stories, and there's hundreds of people who are impacted.
Today, a community works to remember and look ahead as it moves forward.
Something happens with the community, everybody gets together.
This is a Scripps News Special Hour, Uvalde, 1 year later.
A vigil to remember the lives lost last year. 21 in total. 19 students ages 9 to 11 and 2 teachers. Welcome to a special edition of Scripps News Tonight. I'm Christian Bryant in Uvalde, Texas. It's hard to understand just how it's been a year since this town of 15,000 was struck by tragedy. We're here tonight to remember the victims, the lives lost, because this community has invited us to ensure their stories are told. And we're here to tell the stories of this community, one that's forever changed by this tragedy. In the next hour, you'll hear from community members trying to shape the future of life in Uvalde. In some cases, their desires are different. They are split between moving forward or trying to move forward, trying to heal, and also seeking accountability. But a town like this, one filled with pain, can't take those first steps forward until it confronts what has happened. Right now, I want to turn to my colleague, national correspondent Addie Guajardo, and I want to mention that Addie has been here on the ground, and she's been reporting in this community over the last year, really elevating these stories and amplifying these voices. Addie, this has been an emotional day in this community. Will you tell us a little bit about your reporting?
Christian, an extremely emotional day. Look, this was a small elementary school, but the ripple effect that this mass shooting had reached thousands of people. Just behind me, a candlelight vigil for those 21 lives lost. Hundreds of people are here to show their support, to show that there is hope for these families. But this journey has not been easy for so many over the last year. For some, it still feels like that first day, May 24th of last year. The hurt for them still so raw and so painful. We spoke to a mass shooting survivor from Robb Elementary School and her mother. They opened up about this journey of navigating to try to find some kind of peace and how they're using advocacy to heal.
One piano stroke and one note at a time. Through music, therapy.
I shouldn't have to be here right now, but I am, because my friends don't have a voice no more.
And advocacy. 5th grader Caitlin Gonzalez.
Now I have PTSD.
He's on a healing journey.
What kind of scary stuff?
Like gunshots, or he's seen the police break our glass.
Trauma driving her to call for change.
No more silence and gun violence.
A mission in the name of friends she lost in the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School a year ago.
Jackie, Eliana, and Annabelle.
Why is it so important for you to tell their stories?
So that it can't happen anywhere else.
Navigating this journey has not been an easy one.
Her mother, Gladys Gonzalez, says she sought therapy for her daughter at the Uvalde Together Resiliency Center.
She had reoccurring nightmares, an increase in anxiety.
Caitlin only regressed.
I had to go through an alternative route, and that was to go to EMDR.
It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a mental health treatment technique involving eye movement to help heal from trauma, a form of therapy offered in San Antonio, an hour and a half from home. Gonzalez wants more mental health resources offered locally. In 2022, Governor Greg Abbott invested $5 million to establish the Long-Term Resiliency Center in Uvalde to help provide crisis counseling and help the community heal.
The grant is 2 years, and you think $5 million is a lot of money, but it goes very quickly.
You ready?
Yep. I see Caitlin, and I'm blessed to say that I have her. But at the same time, you get that guilt. You know, so many other families who are living with that void.
A void and a grief.
Sometimes I feel sad, sometimes I feel mad.
Felt in public and in private.
Christian, there are hundreds of people at this candlelight vigil tonight, but for many, it's still too raw. It's still too much pain for them to face. Some families tell me that they actually left town because it was too much for them to face the reality that they haven't had that loved one for a year now. Christian.
Yeah, you mentioned that rawness, that pain, even a year later. Addie, I'm pretty curious to know, you've been doing this reporting for a year now. What sort of changes have you seen? How does this experience coming back this week, compare to the first few times that you came and visited Uvalde?
Well, Christian, let me put it this way. When we were here for the first time, the outpouring of support, the hugs, the tears that were shared were just everywhere. Now, a year later, there's been division because some people feel like it's time to move forward to heal families that have been impacted. Some of them feel like they have to continue to call for transparency from officials here in town. But there also has been a strong sense of support today at Starbucks. People wearing Uvalde Strong shirts at HEB, at your Walgreens. They had a butterfly release to honor these 21 victims. They had a bell ringing to honor these victims. They also did a rosemary balloon release outside of Robb Elementary School to give these families a sense of hope, to let them know that there are still community members here that support them, that will be here for them, and that will continue to remember those lives lost in that mass shooting. Christian.
Yeah, that's national correspondent Addie Guajardo. Thank you so much for your reporting and for continuing to stay on this story. One of the things you're going to hear tonight, folks, are voices from the community. And over the last few days, we've heard a lot from the community. Just yesterday, I met somebody who came into town last year after the mass shooting and decided to come back just to pay his respects. There was another person who said they're from the Uvalde community. They said they come to this town square behind me every single day just to show love to those lives lost and to also support the survivors of that tragedy. I want to introduce you to one other person. We heard Addie talking about the way forward and how there may be some divisions within the community. I want to introduce you to Diana Oveda-Caro. She is an activist who's been using her voice to advocate for survivors and for their families. I want you to listen to our conversation and what she had to say about the way forward and where Uvalde stands today. Diana, first and foremost, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
I wanted to talk a bit about community divisions, right?
Okay.
How has the shooting and the aftermath divided this community?
Well, I think a lot of it began about the day after the shooting because of the misinformation that had been put out, and then it was walked back. And so right there at that point, the trust of the community was totally, it evaporated because the stories weren't what they were initially told. And so, of course, that progressed. Every single day, more things came out, and it just created chaos and a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and that's all played out in our community over the past year.
Yeah, you mentioned misinformation. I'm thinking you're alluding to exactly how things played out on the day of the shooting. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and what Governor Abbott came to Uvalde and announced to the public, as well as his officials, and some of that information not being what we were led to believe that it was.
What do those divisions look like now?
I don't think we've moved the needle very far from May 24th, 2022 to May 24th, 2023. We're still in, I know the families talk about we're frozen in May 24th, 2022, and in lots of ways the community's still there with them because everyone is not quite sure how to move forward. And even though many of us want to move forward, it's kind of hard to do it when we're not all on the same page.
We've talked before about accountability. And I know this is a tough question, but what does accountability look like for you? And what do you think it looks like for this community?
It's very different for every single one of us. For myself, I see accountability as every single officer, the 376 officers that were on site that day, that they are evaluated based on their actions and inactions on that day and judged accordingly, reprimanded, suspended, terminated, whatever their particular action requires. For others in our community, it may be legislation that passes so that we raise the age for the ability to purchase a gun, red flag laws, universal background checks. It looks very different depending on which person you ask. And so because we're not able to agree to disagree, it causes tension. So I felt that today here at the plaza when I was just here earlier visiting. It seems like we're fragmented. Here's this group and this group and this group.
Do you feel like there can be closure without accountability?
No, not at all. Not at all. It has to come about at some point in some way. And we have to have a conversation as a community on how we move forward, allow each other to vent our frustrations, our anger, our truth to each other, listen to it, whether I'm the one speaking or the one receiving, and only after that, processing, I think we can start to move forward. And it's going to be a long process.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're in this community. One of the things you said is like, I'm committed to seeing it through and making sure that, that closure, that accountability happens here. One of the last things that I wanted to ask you about is how this, how Uvalde is viewed. You told me, this tragedy does not define this community. What do you want people to know about Uvalde, Texas?
I want them to know that we are not the sum of May 24th, 2022. It was a tragic event for our community, very personal for 21 families in our community. We are grieving with them at a different level because it wasn't our child, it wasn't our mother that was killed that day. But we are going to be stronger and better for having experienced this tragedy. And I want to celebrate what those 21 lives meant to this community, what they left us with. They left us with vision and dreams and joy and laughter, and all of those things I want to build on.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
The path towards closure and reconciliation is a long one, but there are many people in the community who feel that closure and reconciliation cannot happen without accountability, and they feel they are still waiting for answers. Plus, a look at how a local artist has taken a different path to bring some light into the darkness. We'll see you in a few.
Those are my angels, and I love them so much, and I know that they're gonna be around us today. I always remember the good times that I had with them, and so that's why I'm ready to do this.
Welcome back to a special hour of Scripps News. The man you just heard was Arnulfo Arnie Reyes. He and 11 of his students were shot on this day 1 year ago. Only Reyes survived. Reyes has not yet returned to teaching, though he told our Addie Guajardo he is still considering it. Folks, there is still a lot of pain and a lot of trauma in this community as folks are trying to move forward. We spent the last few days in this town of 15,000 hearing from community members about what has changed and how to move forward. Just today, we saw several different kinds of tributes. At the town square behind us, there were mariachi musicians offering the gift of music for the lives lost and for survivors. There were families who were coming to offer up their prayers. They were dropping off flowers, balloons. And, you know, this is exactly what we've seen over the last few days. People really trying to make sure that the names of the victims and the names of the survivors are not forgotten. There was also a butterfly release to honor those who are no longer here today. Here's a bit more from what we've heard and seen from on the ground.
What do I want people to know about Uvalde? Well, I love Uvalde. I love my hometown. I love my people. I love my community. We're not Uvalde strong.
When you come to Uvalde, it's impossible not to see the rallying cry, Uvalde strong. Crosses, signs, and wreaths line the town square of this place 15,000 people call home.
We're Uvalde divided. Families here that were not involved in May 24th tell the families, you know, get over it. Stuff like that happens. Well, how do you get over something like that? 77 minutes. These children, only they and God knows what they went through those 77 minutes.
The leader of this small church off the main strip in Uvalde is angry. He's angry that a year after the tragedy, families are still begging for answers as to why a gunman was able to kill 19 children and 2 teachers without action for over an hour.
What will bring healing is when the families get answers.
But answers and closure have been hard to come by. So Abel Ortiz, a local artist, took a different path to bring some light into the darkness.
We call them the healing murals of Uvalde because that was the original idea. Art heals. Art persuades the heart.
Ortiz spearheaded the project, helping recruit dozens of artists from around the state to immortalize the students' smiles in paintings that are larger than life.
And here we have Ellie.
Eliana Ellie Garcia was about to turn 10 the week she was killed.
Ellie is represented as like in a baseball card format.
Sports card.
Sports
right?
card, because she won the championship that week before the tragedy. The uncles, the aunts, the grandfather, the grandmother, the parents, the sisters, they all painted flowers. She loved duckies. Wow. She was a cheerleader. She loved sports. And again, she was really a child of faith. That's why I called her Jesus' all-star.
Lives were robbed here. But for Ortiz, these murals are how the town begins to change the narrative, healing through art and turning tragedy to triumph.
And some people have got concerns about being defined by the tragedy, but it's not the tragedy that defines us, it's how we respond to the tragedy that's going to define us.
Powerful words from Abel Ortiz there. One of the things that I want to highlight about these murals is how the personalities of these children really come out. From Ellie G, as we saw, there was basketball, there were flowers, there were takis. The lettering of her name was spelled out in Canto lettering. It's a really beautiful thing to see, and we see exactly what people are trying to do to make sure these lives are remembered. Still ahead tonight, do something is something we hear again and again from gun control advocates, right up to the president himself. These calls for action came up after this school shooting rattled the nation. But is it all talk, and why? We take a deeper look at the state of gun politics a year after Uvalde. And something we want to do here is reflect on the 21 victims one by one this hour. Neve Alyssa Bravo was 10 years old. Her name is spelled backwards, is heaven. Her cousin wrote on Facebook that she now flies with the angels. 9-year-old Jackie Cazares. Just weeks before the tragedy, she celebrated her first communion. Her father told ABC News Jackie would always go out of her way to help anyone around her. 10-year-old McKenna Lee Elrod. Her family says she loved to play softball, she loved gymnastics, loved to dance and sing, and loved animals. Also, Jose Manuel Flores Jr. was 10 years old. His mother said he was her little shadow. His father told CNN he wanted to become a police officer. 9-year-old Eliana Ellie Garcia, Ellie G, as it says on her mural. She was just weeks away from her 10th birthday. Her family said she loved cheerleading and dreamed of one day becoming a teacher. And we remember Irma Garcia. The mother of 4 was just about to complete her 23rd year of teaching at Robb Elementary School. Her husband and high school sweetheart, Joe Garcia, died 2 days after the shooting of a heart attack. They were said to have loved barbecuing together. We'll be right back.
This is a Scripps News special hour, remembering the 21 lives lost on May 24th, 2022. This is Uvalde, 1 year later, with Christian Bryant.
We want to take a moment to honor the lives that were lost far too soon, like 10-year-old Uzia Garcia, or Uzi. He's said to have loved video games and trampolines. His aunt told the New York Times he loved to make you laugh. 10-year-old Amerie Jo Garza was a part of the Girl Scouts. The Girl Scouts of the USA posthumously honored her with one of its highest honors, the Bronze Cross. She had just completed her bridging ceremony a week before the mass shooting. 10-year-old Xavier Lopez. His cousin told the Associated Press he loved to play baseball and go swimming. His mother told the Washington Post hours before the tragedy she took a photo of Xavier holding his honor roll certificate. 10-year-old Jace Carmelo Huevanos. His grandpa says every morning Jace made a pot of coffee for his grandparents. His family says his dog, Fifi, would wait for him to get home from school every day. 10-year-old Tess Mata was a massive Houston Astros fan. Her family told ESPN she'd watch tutorial videos to get her throwing form just right. Tess's older sister threw out the first pitch at the Astros game months later with her parents' picture pinned to her jersey. And 11-year-old Miranda Mathis. Her family says she loved spending time outdoors, loved unicorns and mermaids. Her mother says she wants people to remember Miranda by her smile and beautiful eyes. Today, the state senator representing Uvalde, Roland Gutierrez, led fellow senators from both parties in resolutions honoring the lives lost in the shooting. Senators stood and shared anecdotes about the victims, their passions and dreams, and their families. Senator Gutierrez closed with a message of prayer, invoking the innocence of childhood to guide their actions going forward.
I pray that in all our differences, we aspire to our better angels. Perhaps remember those moments when we were little, when we played ball with our friends, or played dolls or toy soldiers or with our pets. I ask you to remember those days as you look at the pictures of these children. Remember your better angels. As you forge forward in these remaining days in this building, as you come back into future sessions, what do we want for ourselves and for our children and for our grandchildren? Ask yourselves that. We are broken and we can fix a few things.
Senator Gutierrez has also vocally called for accountability on the police response to the shooting and stricter gun laws. President Biden and the First Lady also took a moment to mourn at the White House. The president said there have been some 650 mass shootings in the year since Uvalde, and he called again for Congress to act on gun control.
Too many everyday places have become killing fields in communities all across every part of America. And in each place, we hear the same message. Do something. For God's sake, please do something.
That brings us to national correspondent John Moan. John, calls for new gun laws is something we hear time and time again, especially when children are involved. What, if anything, has changed in the year since Uvalde?
Well, in a short words, nothing. But I want to call attention to the fact that we're at the vigil right now. They just wrapped up singing a song called Amor Eterno in my Pocho Español, roughly translates to eternal love. Eternal love to not forget the people whose lives were lost, but also remembering that the pain felt is eternal and that the loss is eternal. And that being said, they want to turn that pain into purpose. But that being said, again, we're 5 days away from the end of the Texas legislature, and lawmakers at the Capitol have not passed any meaningful gun control legislation.
Gun tragedies that happen 10 days apart. A shooter rampages through a Buffalo, New York supermarket, killing 10 people. Within weeks, New York state lawmakers pass a bill to restrict rifle sales to those 21 years or older and other new gun laws.
Thoughts and prayers won't fix this, but taking strong action will.
In Uvalde, Texas, a rifle-wielding teenager walks into Robb Elementary School, unleashes a maelstrom of bullets, killing 19 school children and 2 teachers. The answer at the Texas legislature, no action on gun control.
We have to be able to regulate the guns that are killing people indiscriminately, and it is the guns.
Democratic Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez has filed 21 gun safety bills since the Uvalde shooting 1 year ago. None of those expected to make it to the governor's desk this session.
It wasn't me coming having them knock on your door. It's all they had left. To be able to come to you and advocate so that this wouldn't happen again.
He's tried tacking gun regulations as amendments to bills. He delivered an impassioned speech when he was shut down by Republican Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
Dan Patrick doesn't care about our kids. Dan Patrick doesn't care about what's happening right now in this state. He only cares about his own ambition, and he's going to break every rule there is. He's not going to have this discussion.
Instead, GOP lawmakers in Texas say the solution to mass shootings is to fortify schools. Republicans have proposed legislation that would require armed security officers on school campuses, mandate active shooter plans, put panic buttons in classrooms, and incentivize school employees who are certified to carry firearms with a $25,000 stipend. At the Texas State House, every attempt this session post-Uvalde to pass anything resembling gun control ran into Republican opposition. Uvalde parents Brett and Nikki Cross, who lost their 10-year-old son Uzziah Garcia, were not fazed by the odds against them.
I just don't want any of you to sit here where I'm sitting. I don't want you to have to identify your child's body based on what he was wearing to school that day.
They testified in April after waiting 16 hours in the State House. We later followed them as they lobbied lawmakers to pass HB 2744, a bill that would raise the legal age to buy a rifle from 18 to 21.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
On our visit, most offices heard them out, except the chair of the committee, Republican Representative Ryan Guillen, whose staffers said he was too busy to talk. Joining them, parents from another mass shooting at a Texas school, Rhonda Hart, whose daughter Kim Vaughn was killed by a gunman in Santa Fe High School in 2018, and Christina Delgado, a parent moved by the Santa Fe shooting to become a gun control advocate.
It's sad sometimes to have to be a broken record, but if we have to be to save another community, we will do so.
The bill made it out of committee but died when it wasn't scheduled for a vote in the full House. Democratic lawmakers tried to add it as an amendment, but Republicans stripped it. Manuel Rizzo is the uncle of Robb Elementary School shooting victim Jacqueline Casares.
They're not looking at the deaths of our children, the deaths of the children in Uvalde and the teachers as something that's important. They don't want to prioritize it. And so we're going to continue the fight.
Texas lawmakers only meet in these halls every other year, so it's already hard to get new laws passed in the state of Texas. The governor could call for a special session to accomplish the things that he wants to get done. That being said, a year after Uvalde, Governor Greg Abbott has repeatedly waved away any calls for new gun restrictions.
A University of Texas poll released in May showed 76% of voters in the state support raising the legal age to purchase any firearm from 18 years of age to 21 years of age, and Republicans backing the proposal 64% to 31%. But Jerry Greenberg, a former Texas House member who is now a University of Texas professor, says gerrymandering of districts has tilted Republicans further to the right to be non-responsive to voters on a topic like gun control.
And when a pendulum swings too far one way or the other, you do start to see course corrections. Will we see that? Will we see changes on some of these issues?
Over the last 3 decades, Texas lawmakers have voted to loosen the state's gun laws.
Where do you find the motivation to keep going?
Jackie doesn't want us to give up. And I will tell you that I hope that I get to make it to where she's at today. And she receives me and she tells me, "Thank you, Godfather, for not giving up. We will never give up."
Now, Republicans say they have advanced some curbs on gun access in Texas. Democrats say, though, that's too little, too late. Plus, all those ideas already exist in federal law. Christian?
All right, we appreciate your reporting. National correspondent John Moe. Right now, we want to bring in Nicole Golden, the executive director of Texas Gun Sense, which is pushing for gun control legislation, including raising the minimum age to buy a semi-automatic rifle in Texas to 21. This is something we've been hearing from community members and something that they want. Nicole, I appreciate you joining us. Let's start with this. A year after this tragedy, are Americans safer?
No, sadly to say, certainly not. As your coverage mentioned earlier, we are about to face the end of our legislative session here in Texas in just a handful of days, and no true solutions to prevent gun violence have been put into place to prevent the next shooting in our state.
I want to bring in some polling here, if you don't mind. A Gallup poll from October shows 57% of Americans say gun laws should be made more strict. Right after Uvalde, it was actually up to 66%. Why is the polling not turning into actual policy? What's the barrier and what's the disconnect here?
It's a great question. You're right. Polls are strongly in our favor. Public will is on our side. 76% of Texans support raising the age to 21 to purchase semi-automatic rifles like that used to murder 21 students and teachers on this day last year. An overwhelming majority of Texans and Americans support background checks on all gun sales. These are common sense approaches. Most people know that, whether they're gun owners or not gun owners, but there is a disconnect. Our lawmakers are, paid to be silent by the powers of the gun lobby, and they have chosen, political power and keeping their seats over saving the lives of our children. We are a nonpartisan organization, but we recognize the political games at play here.
When you talk about common sense gun reforms, you say you recognize the right to bear arms, but want more sensible policies. What do you consider sensible policies? This is something that we hear these discussions about gun control legislation, but make it plain for us. What do you consider sensible policies?
Yeah, I alluded to a couple a moment ago. Raising the age to 21 to purchase an AR-15 type rifle, that would only exclude 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. It's a very moderate measure. And the bill that we had here in Texas was so moderate, it was really just to regulate a subset of that type of rifle. Really, really small measure. Requiring a background check on every gun sale, meaning that private transfers also have to initiate a background check before that sale is made to make sure that the person who is buying that gun does not have a documented dangerous history. Extreme risk protection orders, otherwise known as red flag laws, which would implement a legal process that would temporarily separate an individual making imminent threats of lethal harm to self or others from their firearm so that a crisis could be averted. Safe gun storage regulations and education. These are all things that so many people support.
Yeah. Nicole Golden with Texas Gun Sense, we appreciate you breaking this down for us.
Thank you.
After a shooting like what happened here in Uvalde, there is a ton of attention, and then something else takes the top headline. But these families, their neighbors, don't have the luxury of just moving on. The pain will be with them for the rest of their lives. Up next, we show you one effort to keep the conversation from fading away. All this hour, we want to remember the lives lost. And right now, we want to highlight Ava Murals. The fourth grade teacher was an educator for 17 years. Her daughter says the two shared many memories, singing karaoke and teaming up for TikToks together. Loved ones of 10-year-old Alethea Ramirez say she loved to draw. She dreamed of being an artist. Google honored her posthumously by changing its doodle to her drawing she entered in a contest. And 10-year-old Annabelle Rodriguez was an honor roll student. Her family says she loved TikTok dances and loved school. They say she dreamed of being a vet and had a bigger heart than Texas. We'll be right back. Welcome back, gang. We want to reflect on the lives lost 1 year ago. 10-year-old Maite Rodriguez loved animals and the ocean. Her family says she dreamed of going to college and becoming a marine biologist. 10-year-old Alexandria Lexi Rubio also had college plans. Loved ones say she wanted to play softball, major in math, and eventually become a lawyer. They described her as fierce with a beautiful smile. And Layla Salazar, the 11-year-old, was a Dallas Cowboys fan. She loved smiling, singing, and dancing. Her family says she was always cheerful and respectful and was the first one to greet friends and loved ones. Folks, we're back here in Uvalde, Texas, where it is a sober, somber, quiet evening. This town of 15,000 has really come out to show their support for the families of the victims and the survivors. And a big part of this is talking about what has happened, being able to talk about the trauma and using that as a way to move forward. Right now, I'm joined by national correspondent Axel Tercios. Axel, I mean, you've been coming back and forth here over the last year. Tell us a little bit about this one-of-a-kind story that you came across and about how folks are using conversation to really help in the healing process.
Parents in the community that are using other platforms to keep the conversation moving forward, and that's the idea that this parent here in Uvalde had. His name is Adam Martinez. He created a podcast, and the whole idea is to keep the conversation moving forward, keep the conversation alive with what happened here in Uvalde, also to talk about ways of improving safety in schools for children, and most importantly, to keep the memories of those people who died alive.
As far as those failures, what would you say, those things that just stay the same, that status quo that just stays the same?
Adam Martinez is asking hard questions.
In one hand, or maybe two hands, you can pick like how many people have actually been vocal.
Looking for real answers and actions.
For a long time, there was no accountability.
Hosting a podcast with members of the Uvalde community.
Karma Corner is the name of the podcast, and our group is called Karma. Stands for Keep All Righteous Minds Aware. We have a pretty good following. We've gone to the Capitol, we've done protesting, we've done all kinds of different benefits and things for people that need help, and it continues to grow.
Martinez, a 90-year-old son, Zayon, was at Robb Elementary during the mass shooting.
How have you and your family, and especially your son, been able to cope with all of this? It's been a year.
I think just staying active, whether it's protesting, whether my son's playing baseball or doing other events, just making sure that he's active. giving him some responsibilities. He got like a little guinea pig.
The podcast, a public digital record for Martinez to discuss the mass shooting and its aftermath with survivors, families of the victims, and public officials.
People that make phone calls to like the mayor, to the superintendents, to the board, and says you're handling it wrong.
One of the podcast guests, Jesse Rizzo, whose niece, 90-year-old Jackie Cáceres, died in the shooting.
I think we haven't received any type of answers. The accountability, transparency, and Adam has been at the forefront from the beginning. Any type of format that he can use, in this case a podcast, that's welcomed by the community.
But most importantly, Martinez says podcasting allows him to keep the memories of those lost in the Uvalde shooting alive.
It's an opportunity to talk to survivors and parents who lost and get to know their children so we can share those memories with the rest of the world so that when they think about Uvalde, they don't forget about the 21.
Christian, Adam told me that his son Zion has been affected tremendously by what this terrible experience he had at the school, and at some point, it was the whole family coming together to help him process all this traumatic event. So he decided to place him in homeschool. And as for the podcast, they published the first episode in late April, and so far they have done 5 episodes. In one of them, they spoke to the Uvalde mayor, Don McLaughlin, and the podcast can be found on Spotify.
Yeah, Axel, thank you so much for your reporting. I appreciate it, man. Folks, throughout this hour, we've been honoring the lives lost, and we want to make sure to take a moment to remember the victims. Like Jayla Nicole Silguero. She was 10 years old. Her parents say she did not want to go to school the morning of the tragedy. They remember her as a dancer who loved the outdoors. 10-year-old Eliana Torres was said to have a smile that could light up your soul. Loved ones say she loved TikTok videos and playing softball. They say she always put others before herself. The family of 10-year-old Rogelio Torres say he went to play football in heaven on May 24th of last year. They said he loved being outside, always had a smile on his face, and was eager to help. May his and all the victims' memories live on forever. We'll be right back. Folks, we want to thank you for joining us tonight as we look back in remembrance and look forward to a more hopeful future. Earlier, we spoke with a muralist who had created images of the lives lost. And before we go, we want to leave you with those images one more time.